The sun beat down mercilessly on the Nevada desert, turning the asphalt into a shimmering black river of heat. Claire Devlin gripped the steering wheel of her sleek black sports car, her knuckles white as the engine sputtered, and died with a final defeated cough. Smoke curled lazily from under the hood, a thin gray plume against the vast, empty sky. She cursed under her breath, stepping out onto the scorching road in her high heels and white-fitted dress, the fabric already clinging uncomfortably to her skin. No signal on her phone. No roadside assistance app would load. No passing cars in sight for miles. The isolation hit her like a wave, this powerful 34-year-old CEO of Devlin Group, one of the largest real estate conglomerates in the West, reduced to helplessness in the middle of nowhere. She waved at a distant truck that blurred by without slowing, then another, her frustration mounting with each indifferent vehicle. Hours seemed to pass in the blistering heat, her makeup melting, her composure cracking. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Just as despair began to settle in, a rumbling sound approached from the horizon. An old battered pickup truck, its paint chipped and faded, slowed to a stop on the shoulder. Dust swirled around its tires as the driver's door creaked open. A man stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a worn button-up shirt with sleeves rolled up to his elbows, sweat beading on his forehead. He wiped his hands on a rag tucked in his pocket, his eyes squinting against the sun as he approached. "Need some help?" he called out, his voice steady but laced with the rough edge of someone used to long days under the hood. Claire looked up, shielding her eyes, and froze. The face was older, etched with lines from years of hard work, but unmistakable. "Jack," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. Jack Harlan paused mid-step, his expression shifting from concern to recognition, then to something guarded. At 36, he was still the same mechanic from the small town of Silver Creek, fixing cars for locals and scraping by. But 5 years ago, he had been the man who sat alone in a coffee shop waiting 3 hours for a blind date, who never showed. Claire Devlin, the woman who had stood him up without explanation, leaving only a vague apology text days later before vanishing from his life. "Claire," he said flatly, no warmth in his tone. He glanced at her car, then back at her as if deciding whether to turn around and drive away. She straightened, trying to regain her poise despite the sweat trickling down her back. I can't believe it's you. Of all people here." Jack didn't smile. He walked past her to pop the hood of her car, peering inside with practiced efficiency. Radiator shot, probably overheated. "You're not going anywhere in this without a tow." Claire shifted uncomfortably, her heels sinking slightly into the soft shoulder gravel. Memories flooded back, the dating app match, the excitement of their messages, the coffee shop date she had agreed to. But on that day, staring at her reflection in a luxury mirror, she had panicked. Jack was from a different world, simple, hardworking, without the polish of her boardroom life. She had convinced herself it wouldn't work, that she wasn't ready for someone who might see through her carefully constructed facade. So she hadn't gone and regretted it in quiet moments ever since. Now here, he was the only one who had stopped. "I tried calling for help," she said weakly. "No signal out here." Jack nodded without looking at her. "Happens a lot. Town's about an hour that way. I can give you a ride. Get someone to tow this later." She hesitated, glancing at his truck, the faded upholstery visible through the window tools scattered in the bed. It was a far cry from her chauffeured rides, but she had no choice. "Thank you. I appreciate it." He closed the hood with a thud and motioned to the passenger side. "Get in. It's getting hotter out here." Claire climbed in the cab, smelling faintly of oil and coffee. As Jack started the engine, the air conditioning hummed to life, a blessed relief. They pulled back onto the road in silence, the desert stretching endlessly around them. Finally, she couldn't hold it in. "I never expected to see you again. Especially not like this." Jack kept his eyes on the road, his grip steady on the wheel. "Me neither. But this time, I'm not waiting for an explanation. Just tell me if you need help or not." The words hung between them, a quiet echo of the past. Claire stared out the window, her heart pounding, wondering if this unexpected reunion was fate's way of offering a second chance or just another road she'd regret not taking. The truck rattled along the dusty highway, the engine's low hum the only sound breaking the heavy silence between them. Claire sat rigidly in the passenger seat, her hands clasped in her lap, the air conditioning doing little to ease the tension coiling in her chest. Jack kept his focus on the road ahead, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the gear shift. The desert landscape blurred by endless stretches of sand and scrub brush under a relentless sun that was finally dipping toward the horizon. 5 minutes passed without a word. Claire glanced at him sideways, tracing the familiar lines of his profile, the strong jaw, the faint stubble, the way his brow furrowed slightly as if lost in thought. She had replayed that missed date in her mind more times than she cared to admit, the guilt a quiet shadow in her high-powered life. But now, faced with him again, the words stuck in her throat. Too much time had passed. Too many unspoken regrets. Jack reached over and flicked on the old radio, twisting the dial until a soft country tune crackled through the speakers. The melody was simple, a guitar strumming lazily about lost loves and open roads. Claire couldn't help but smile faintly. "You still listen to music on cassette?" she asked, her voice tentative, breaking the quiet like a pebble in still water. He nodded without taking his eyes off the road. "Yeah, it's simple. No ads interrupting, no skipping tracks halfway through." She turned the words over in her mind, sensing the undercurrent. "What about interrupted dates, then?" Jack's jaw tightened for a split second, but he shrugged it off. "Sometimes if someone's quiet for too long, the other person has to learn to listen to themselves." The response hung there, a gentle rebuke wrapped in calm. Claire looked out the window, watching the sun paint the desert in shades of orange and gold. She remembered the messages they had exchanged back then, light-hearted banter about favorite books, shared laughs over bad movies. He had seemed so genuine, so unlike the polished executives she dealt with daily. But on the day of their date, standing in her penthouse apartment, she had frozen. What if he saw the real her, the one buried under board meetings and family expectations? She had chosen silence, letting the clock tick past without a word. The truck slowed as they approached a rundown gas station, its faded sign flickering in the dying light. Jack pulled in, killing the engine. "Need to fill up. You want anything?" "Water, coffee." Claire nodded, stepping out to stretch her legs. The air was cooler now, carrying the faint scent of gasoline and dust. She wandered toward the small attached diner, its windows smudged but inviting. Peering inside, her breath caught. It was the same coffee shop, the one where they were supposed to meet 5 years ago. The booths were worn, the counters sticky with age, but the corner table was unchanged, its vinyl seats cracked, just as she remembered from the photos he had sent her that day. She stood there frozen as memories flooded back the excitement of their online connection, her decision to bail at the last minute, the apology text she had sent days later that went unanswered, though she knew she deserved the silence. A tap on her shoulder pulled her from the reverie. Jack stood behind her, holding 2 steaming cups. "Figured you might want this," he said, handing her one. "Vanilla latte. Not sure if you still like it." She took the cup, her fingers brushing his briefly. The warmth seeped through the paper, mirroring the unexpected stir in her chest. "I do. Thank you." They sat on the tailgate of the truck, sipping in companionable quiet as the sun set. Finally, Claire couldn't hold back. "Back then, were you angry with me?" Jack stared at the horizon, the cup balanced on his knee. "Not angry, just sad. I trusted someone who wasn't ready to be trusted." Claire's throat tightened. "It wasn't you. I left because of me. I wasn't ready for anyone to see me when I wasn't perfect." He turned to her, then his eyes searching hers. "Nobody's perfect, Claire. That's the point." As night fell, they continued on, stopping at a roadside diner in a small town off the highway. The place was humble checkered tablecloths, flickering neon sign, the hum of truckers chatting over pie. They ordered simple meals, burgers, fries, nothing fancy. Under the warm glow of the overhead lights, Claire felt exposed without her usual armor of designer clothes and confidence. Jack watched her across the table, his gaze steady. "You know," he said suddenly, "that day I waited until the shop closed, left a vanilla latte on the table just in case you showed up late." Claire's fork paused midair. Tears pricked her eyes. "I did show up," That night after closing, the latte was still there but cold. I stood outside staring through the window, and then I turned away. I was too scared to knock. The admission hung between them, raw and vulnerable. Jack didn't press, didn't judge. He just nodded, as if piecing together a puzzle he had long ago set aside. Outside, crickets chirped in the bushes, a soft counterpoint to the diner's murmur. For the first time in years, Claire felt the weight of her choices lift slightly. Two hearts, once divided by silence, were beginning to learn the art of staying put instead of walking away. The days blurred into a quiet rhythm after that roadside rescue. Claire found herself drawn back to Silver Creek more often than she anticipated, trading her city suits for simple jeans and t-shirts, her luxury sedan parked discreetly on the outskirts of town. She would sit in the old coffee shop, nursing a vanilla latte, waiting for Jack to finish his shift at the garage. Their conversations grew easier, light talks about the weather, his latest repair jobs, her vague mentions of work stress, without delving into details. For the first time in years, Claire felt seen not as the heir to Devlin Group, but as just Claire laughing over burnt diner toast or sharing stories under the stars. It was a fragile peace, one that shattered on a crisp morning 2 weeks later. The garage buzzed with its usual activity, engines revving, tools clanging, mechanics bantering over coffee. Jack was under the hood of a rusty sedan when the sleek black limousine pulled up outside its tinted windows, reflecting the morning sun like a mirror. A man in a crisp suit stepped out, his polished shoes crunching on the gravel as he scanned the shop. "I'm looking for Claire Devlin," he announced, his voice clipped and authoritative as if the name alone should command immediate attention. The shop fell silent. Wrenches paused, mid-turn conversations halted. Jack straightened slowly, wiping grease from his hands with a rag, his eyes narrowing. Claire, who had stopped by early with fresh coffee for him, froze in the corner of the office, her cup trembling slightly in her grip. The man spotted her and strode forward. "Ms. Devlin, we've been searching everywhere. The board meeting has been postponed twice. Your father is furious. We need you back in Vegas immediately." Whispers erupted among the mechanics. "Devlin as in Devlin Group," one muttered. "The real estate empire she's loaded." Another whispered, eyes wide. Claire's face paled. She set the coffee down with deliberate calm and stepped forward. "Not now, Marcus. Tell my father I'll handle it. Go back without me." Marcus hesitated, glancing around the grimy shop with thinly veiled disdain. "This isn't the place for you, Ms. Devlin. You're throwing away your career for people like them." The words landed like a slap, echoing in the sudden hush. Claire's jaw tightened, but she said nothing, as Marcus turned on his heel and left the limo pulling away in a cloud of dust. Jack hadn't moved. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, those steady blue eyes that had once looked at her with quiet understanding, now held a distance that chilled her. The other mechanics drifted back to work, casting awkward glances, leaving them in a bubble of strained quiet. By afternoon, Claire sat alone in the coffee shop, staring at her untouched latte. Jack didn't show. Her texts went unread. Finally, she walked to the garage, her heart pounding. He was bent over an engine, focused intently, as if the world outside didn't exist. "You know now, don't you?" she said softly, standing at the edge of the bay. Jack didn't look up. "Yeah, I know. Are you angry with me?" He straightened, setting down his wrench with a clatter. "No, I'm not angry." His voice was even, but there was a weariness in it that hadn't been there before. "Then what?" Claire pressed, stepping closer. "Talk to me." He met her gaze at last, and the distance in his eyes made her stomach drop. "I get it now. Why you walked away back then, and why I don't fit in your world." Claire shook her head, her voice rising slightly. "You think I look down on you, that I'm ashamed?" "I don't think that," Jack replied, his tone measured. "But I don't want to be some interesting phase in your life. Rich folks step into our world when they want a break, a thrill, a taste of something real. Then they go back to where they belong." Her chest tightened, a mix of hurt and frustration bubbling up. "That's not what this is. I'm not looking for a thrill. I'm looking for a place where someone sees me as a person, not a name or a fortune." Jack crossed his arms, leaning against the workbench. "But you haven't been real with me, Claire. You're still tied to that life, the fancy cars, the boardrooms, the Devlin name. And I'm just the guy on the sidelines fixing engines while you play pretend." She felt tears sting her eyes, her voice breaking. "I didn't lie to you." "You didn't lie," he agreed quietly. "But you didn't tell the truth either. And that space between, that's the gap." Claire stepped back, the weight of his words pressing down. "So what do you want me to do?" Jack looked away toward the open garage door where the desert wind whispered through. "I don't want you to do anything. I just want you to choose for real. But I'm afraid this time you won't choose me." The silence stretched thick and painful. Claire turned and walked out, her footsteps echoing on the concrete. Outside, the black limo idled at the curb, a silent reminder of the world waiting for her. She stood there, caught between two realities, the polished empire she had built and the simple man who had seen her vulnerabilities without judgment. For the first time, she realized the greatest loss wasn't power or position, it was losing the one person who had made her want to be truly seen. After that wrenching conversation in the garage, Claire vanished from Silver Creek. No more quiet visits to the coffee shop, no texts lighting up Jack's phone, no glimpses of her walking down the dusty main street. The town felt smaller without her, the days stretching longer as Jack buried himself in work. He spoke less to his coworkers, stayed late under flickering fluorescent lights, and for the first time in years, skipped his morning ritual of playing the old cassette tapes. The silence in his truck cab mirrored the emptiness he felt, a reminder that some gaps couldn't be bridged with wrenches and oil changes. One afternoon, as Jack inspected a faulty transmission, a small girl with curly hair bounded into the shop, her sneakers squeaking on the concrete floor. She couldn't have been more than 10, her eyes wide and curious as she scanned the room. "You, Jack?" she asked, tilting her head. He wiped his hands on a rag and knelt to her level. "That's me. What's up, kid?" She thrust a folded piece of paper into his hand, then spun on her heel and darted out before he could ask who sent her. Unfolding it, Jack recognized the neat handwriting immediately. "You once said you didn't want me to do anything, but I've chosen. And this time, I've chosen right. If you still believe, come to the coffee shop, 4 o'clock, our old table. No one's waiting for anyone, just two people sharing a drink by chance." His heart skipped. He stared at the note for a long moment, the words blurring slightly. Part of him wanted to crumple it to protect himself from another letdown, but another part, the one that had stopped for her in the desert, pushed him forward. At 4:10, Jack pushed open the coffee shop door, his work boots leaving faint grease marks on the floor. The place was quiet, the afternoon sun slanting through the windows in golden shafts. Claire sat at the corner table, dressed simply in a sweater and jeans, her hair loose around her shoulders. No makeup. No pretense, just her with a vulnerability that made his chest ache. On the table sat a single vanilla latte steam, rising gently. She looked up as he approached, her eyes searching his face. Jack sat down without a word, the chair scraping against the linoleum. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said softly. He met her gaze. "I almost didn't." Claire slid an envelope across the table. "This is my resignation from Devlin Group. My shares, my position, everything. I'm starting over here. No one knows who I am. No one needs to. I just need one person to see me as I am." Jack picked up the envelope, feeling the weight of the papers inside. Before he could respond, the shop's owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Ellis, with silver hair pinned back and an apron dusted with flour, approached with 2 slices of pie. "Been watching you two," she said, setting the plates down. "Known Jack since he was knee-high fixing bikes in my backyard. Never seen him look at anyone the way he does you." She turned to Claire. "Thought you didn't fit here at first. Too polished. But now this town could use someone like you. Not because you're special, but because you came back when you could have kept running." Mrs. Ellis patted Jack's shoulder and walked away, leaving them in stunned quiet. Claire's voice trembled as she continued, "I have nothing left but the truth. If you don't want it, if you don't want me, I'll go. But if there's even a sliver of belief left, I'll stay. We'll build something from scratch." Jack opened the envelope, scanning the documents briefly. Resignation letters, share transfer forms, all signed and dated. He looked at her, really looked, seeing the fear and hope mingled in her eyes. Slowly, deliberately, he tore the envelope in half, letting the pieces fall to the table. "I've never loved for shares or status," he said, his voice low but steady. "I love someone who dares to sit down even when the seat's been empty before." He reached for the latte, lifting it slightly. Claire picked up hers, their cups clinking softly in a makeshift toast. "Vanilla," he murmured. "Still a bit weak. But with you? It's just right." Claire laughed, a sound bright and genuine, even as tears spilled down her cheeks. Not from pain this time, but from the sweet release of finally being home. In that moment, truths that had once cut like knives began to heal, stitching together the fragments of two lives that had almost slipped away. 3 months slipped by in a haze of quiet contentment, the kind that built slowly like layers of paint on an old house. Jack and Claire had moved into a modest wooden cabin on the outskirts of Silver Creek, tucked behind a grove of scrub oaks that whispered in the desert wind. There was no grand wedding, no lavish reception, just a simple exchange of vows under the open sky witnessed by Mrs. Ellis and a handful of Jack's co-workers from the garage. The yard was small, but theirs with a patch of grass where Claire planted wildflowers and a long wooden table they had built together from salvaged lumber, its surface already scarred with the marks of shared meals. Claire had traded her corporate life for something grounded. She worked as a bookkeeper at the garage, balancing ledgers and invoices with the same precision she once applied to multi-million-dollar deals. Afternoons found her in the garden, knees in the dirt, tending rows of vegetables that thrived against the odds in the arid soil. Evenings were for cooking simple dinners, roast chicken with herbs from the yard, fresh bread from the local bakery, and reading by the fire, her head resting on Jack's shoulder as the day unwound. One lazy afternoon, as Jack tinkered with an old engine in the shed, Claire approached with an envelope in hand. She set it beside him on the workbench, her expression calm but resolute. "This is the second time I've turned down my shares," she said. "Not to prove anything, just because, here with you, I have enough." Jack set down his tools, glancing at the envelope without opening it. He pulled out a stool from under the bench and gestured for her to sit. "Then sit down," he replied softly, "and don't go anywhere else." She did, and in that simple act, the last threads of doubt between them unraveled. The envelope stayed unopened, a symbol of choices made freely. That evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, they sat on the back porch under the warm glow of string lights. Claire leaned her head against his shoulder, the desert air cooling around them. "Do you think we came together too late?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer. "No, we came at the right time, when we both knew that staying meant letting go of our egos. Love isn't about never leaving. It's about leaving and coming back with your heart still whole for each other." Claire smiled, tracing patterns on his hand with her finger. The words settled over them like a blanket, warm and reassuring. Later, as rain began to patter softly on the tin roof, a rare desert shower. Jack turned to her, his eyes reflecting the dim light. "I won't promise to love you forever," he murmured, "but I promise, if there's ever a day you sit quietly watching the rain, I'll be the first to pull up a chair. No questions, just sitting with you." She looked at him, tears glistening but unshed, and nodded. In that promise lay the essence of what they had built. Not grand declarations, but the quiet courage to be real, to return when it mattered most. Sometimes the thing that holds love together isn't a vow, it's the bravery to live truthfully and the willingness to come back when you've strayed. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that second chances come from facing the truth and choosing to stay, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to know that love finds its way back when you're ready to let it in.